Hi, welcome to Dice Control Dojo. I'm Phil, and I practice every day and share my tips so we can all get better at the casino. Join me today. We're talking about the landing. We're fixing things. This is our series on the landing. What happens when the dice land apart? So they weren't together. Either they were together, but they landed just slightly apart. What happens if they land opposite or they land towards each other, like they're landing at an angle? So they're hitting their points, they're not hitting a nice flat surface, or they're just not hitting the angle together. What is causing that? What can we do to fix it? That's our discussion today. So this may be a lot of redundancy from our air discussions, because I'm trying to figure out, when you're looking, are you looking in the air so you can correct it? Are you looking at the landing zone like I'm doing? So if I am looking at the landing zone and I throw the dice and I see one, they're apart from each other. All right, I'm going to know now, from based on this video, what I did and how to fix it. So the first thing first, if your dice are apart just a wee bit, right? That goes back to finger pressures, right? And I talked about this in the air one, but I do something a little different than most people. Is I, once again, use my out two fingers to keep pressure, to keep these together, to keep the dice tight together, and then I put my fingers on top. What does that do for me? It causes me to have problems with, I may be too high or too low on either of these dice, which is fine, but I have to recognize that I do that. That's why I paint my hands a lot, so I can make sure I'm lining them up exactly where I want them each time. Now, if the dice are apart just a wee bit, in my setup, my dice are never apart because I'm always having them locked together. But I can see in the way people do the three-fingered grip that if they're just picking them up, right, they're just picking them up with the three fingers, there is a chance they're not exactly together. And you need to make sure they are. You can't just let them go that way. So if they are just a wee bit apart, right, that may have been the grip pickup. It may have been when you picked it up, they weren't totally tight. And if you throw a 10,000 times like I do, I can feel, just by wiggling my fingers like this, I can feel that those dice are not together. They're pinching my thumb and they're pinching my middle finger. So I know right off the bat they're not together. So I would want to put them down. So when you're doing the turn, obviously I'm lining up my dice. I may be tweaking it a little bit by rolling it like this. That's another way you can feel if the dice are together. Just by just a little movement like that, you can make sure they're together. And if they are together, then that's fine. Then you would see a little mini separation in the air. They may go apart, but when they land, if they're landing apart from each other but they're lined up, that may not be a terrible thing, and the correction just could make sure that your dice are gripped together tight. And if they're landing together and working together, that's fine. That's a minor adjustment at the table. It's a minor adjustment when you're doing this. You're going to have those throws, and that's okay. But what happens if they land inverted? All right, so they landed like this, or they landed like the opposite. So this or this. So they're making an outside V or an inside V, right? What's causing that? Those are pressures. So that's getting back to the pressure issues that we were talking about with your fingers. When you're gripping your dice, right? These first, the middle finger and the thumb pressure, if it's greater, than the outside fingers pressure, the dice are going to separate and be like this. So when they land, they're going to land like that because you're putting too much pressure on it. If they're too much pressure on the outside fingers and not the thumb, look, see, the inside bends. So now your dice are going to land like this. So the way they land, if you're keeping an eye on the way they land, it's really all based on finger pressure. You can recognize if they're inverted, it's an exverted. The exverted, your outside fingers are putting pressure on. Also, too, my fingers fit. I like the way they fit the dice, but your fingers may be different sizes, right? So these two outside fingers may be, your three fingers may be much larger, and your middle finger takes up most of the dice. So you're doing almost a one-finger dice throw. But if these outside fingers also put pressure on the corners, right? If you put pressure on the corners, the dice invert. So you're putting too much pressure on the corners, your thumb, not enough on the middle finger, and look what they do. So you have to, once again, get back to your daily practice every day on making sure. That's why I do these mirror practices, the pickups, the turns. How important have you seen from the air videos and now the landing videos that this part in the morning that people probably blow off rather than just practice throwing, the pickup and turn. When I'm doing the turn, I'm creating that ledge that should have even distribution between the three fingers. If it's not, oh, I love that. And that was a hard 10 too. If they're not, and you're putting too much pressure on your outside or your inside, they're not even, you're going to be having these problems. So you're going to recognize that and be able to get back to basics. Create that ledge on the turn. You have to practice making sure you're looking down and you're putting just all the weight of those dice are evenly distributed on those three fingers. Your thumb's barely holding on so that you can have just the least amount of pressure on that throw. So when you release it, they're just centrifugal force taking the dice away evenly. If you are practicing your finger release on our throw, when we're talking about practicing that 9 times, those dice should roll right out together, just like that. If one's rolling out more than the other, you don't have even pressure among your 3 dice and where your thumb is. So you have to make sure you get back to that and put the dice pressure in where you want it. See how they both came out of my hands at the same time? That's even distribution. So another thing to look for in your practices, if you're seeing that your dice when you're releasing are releasing at different things, making sure you have your ledge lined up and then making sure your pressure is even among the 3. So it's just leaning on that ledge. So when you, oh my God, that was nice. So when you release, they go out perfect. So I know I've been practicing a lot this morning. I've been loving my throws. We're getting closer and closer to Vegas. I'm starting to fine tune things. This is one of those things you can do to fine tune. Seeing how those dice land and making adjustments in your practice to ensure you're having an even distribution in your fingers, your ledge, and your thumb. So when you're releasing, they're going out nice. So join me tomorrow where we're going to be talking about when your dice land, either one first or one goes against the back wall first. okay? How they land. If one's landing first, the left or the right, what's causing that? What's your problem with that, and how can we fix it? So join me tomorrow on my YouTube video. And as always, the best strategy is to fix these corrections before you go to Vegas so you can throw for a long, long, long time.